Which creepy urban legend turned out to be true? Part 1. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. There was a teacher at my high school who had been teaching there since my best friend's older brother used to attend years previous. There were whispers that she always had a favorite senior guy every year, and would eventually have sex with them. Had that teacher for 3 years, and I could definitely see where the legend came from. Years after I graduated, it came out that it was true, after one of her victims, a guy the first somewhat knew, went to his parents, who then called the police. While the investigation was ongoing, the school board quietly moved her to another school. She was eventually found guilty and lost her husband and kids. Only one dude ever spoke put though, so who knows how long this went on. Oh, I have one. In Anchorage, people will tell the story of a woman who died after getting stuck in only knee-deep mud out in Turnagain Arm. The story has all the elements. She was a newlywed, rescuers were gathered around trying to help her, etc. And I think it's widely regarded as an urban legend. But it most certainly did happen. Her name was Adina Dickinson, and it took place in September 1988. Anchorage Daily News article. This is, thankfully, a somewhat more light-hearted urban legend than a lot of the posted ones so far. So, I'd heard several times from friends and whatnot hearsay tales about this creepy, near mythical shoe licker who resided in the Tampa area. Apparently, this dude would walk up to people in public spaces, and would ask them about their shoes, and ask to see the bottoms of them, and would then drop and do his best to lick the bottoms of the shoes before the person could step back down. Naturally, I thought that was just way too weird, and there was no way this wasn't just people making up some bullshit story. Then I ran into the guy, at a taco truck. Skinny dude, longish hair, probably homeless from how he was dressed. Could have been 18, could have been 30. Walks up as I'm waiting for what turns out to have been the best taco I've ever had in my existence, a cochinita pibil, for the curious, and asks about the shoes I'm wearing. I'd just finished performing, and was still wearing some Doc Marten boots, and was more than a little soused. He asks if he can see the treads or something like that. I'm all confused and I'm like, sure, why not, and he drops to the floor, grabs my boot, and starts licking away at the sole. I yelled at the dude, sort of kicked at him, and he scampers off. Weirdest fucking interaction ever. I went to a university near Valley Forge, PA. It used to be a POW camp and a military hospital before the college bought the entire property for $1 in the 1960s. Since there are really only 3 universities near Valley Forge, PA, it will not be hard to deduce which college it was. Lol. Anyways, there was a rumor that underground tunnels and all sorts of stuff was left abandoned in the abandoned sections of the college. Sure enough, it was true. We found a tunnel hatch under our carpet in our dorm room, 2 hatches on the first floor. Furthest most first floor dorm room of each building. It was literally like stepping into 1945. Everything was preserved down there and the tunnels were massive. We eventually ended up in an underground garage, where there were 4 Jeeps parked but all the tires had dry rotted. We realized this was actually beneath our soccer field. Anyways, the tunnels lead to the cafeteria, the admin building, every dorm, and then an old abandoned section of our campus that we had no way of entering topside. We soon realized this was the hospital, morgue. When we got out of the tunnels and walked the floor, it was still like 1945. All the hospital beds were still there, the surgical curtains were still there. Hell, even the tools, like the scalpel, saw, pliers, etc., were still on their trays. It was like everyone all of the sudden up and left and nothing had been moved since then. The morgue still had its slabs and sometimes we would dare each other to slide in there for a period of time. But yeah, it was an urban legend on campus until 3 of us decided to risk expulsion to see if it was true. And it was. When I was a kid, my dad would take me and my brother to High Rock. It's a neat overlook and we could play on the rocks. It was fun, but also a little sobering, as much as things can be for kids, because a girl had died in a hang gliding accident if I remember right. As you drive up to the parking lot for the overlook, the road continues on into the woods. We asked our dad where it went and he told us that you'd be driving down the road and suddenly armed guards would pop out of the woods to stop you because there was a secret government base there. That's the case, except it isn't really secret. It's Raven Rock, which is a nuclear bunker that can act as a remote Pentagon if the country is attacked. Cheney went there during September 11th while Bush was taken somewhere else. You will be detained if you trespass on the property. I went back to High Rock a few years ago while visiting family, and while hanging out at the overlook a truck of teenagers showed up. They asked if I knew what was up the access road, and I told them Raven Rock and not to keep going because they'd be detained. They decided they wanted to check it out anyway. An hour later when I left High Rock, those kids had not come back yet, so I figured they were getting their asses chewed out by a soldier. Fun fact: Raven Rock is the headquarters of the Enclave in Fallout 3. In my city neighborhood when I was a kid, there was the Killer Clown. He was located generally daily above the elementary school grounds, on a giant field with soccer areas and a hill on the side. Well, I went up there one day as a kid, and there he was, swinging in the swing at the top of the side hill. We stared at him for a bit and then ran for our lives when he got off the swing and started running towards us. One day, I remember walking by one of the play areas and there was a line of cop cars parked on this gravel rock hill road going up to the field. I think we all just assumed he was arrested. There was once a time when a neighbor told me someone kept walking round the courtyard of my apartment complex that looked shifty, and I thought I'd check it out. So I walked round there at the same time every night for 2 weeks, and eventually the police came and arrested me for loitering. After explaining what had happened, they let me go with no charge. So I accidentally became an urban legend, if that counts. I often wonder if Stephen King's Children of the Corn was based on a northern town in Maine. I don't recall the name of the town, but my friends and I stopped in on our way to the furthest US point east. The town struck me very weird because every store clerk was like 14 to 17 max. Not just 1 or 2 stores every store. Aside from ourselves, we did not come across one adult in the 2 or so hours we were there. It was a depressed town, nearly a ghost town, and left me with a really unsettled feeling. The man that worked in a law firm on the 24th story of a building. As a running gag, he would tell everyone that the windows in the building were unbreakable, then proceed to run at one of them full force. Once, he did it and the glass didn't break, but the window popped out of the frame, and he fell to his death 24 stories. I saw this on an urban legend show when I was a kid, but found out later that this really happened in my city, Toronto, Canada. My boyfriend works in the same building, and rumor has it that the man landed on a concrete bench at concourse level. A woman and her child had just been sitting there minutes before his fatal plunge. Opening square bracket dot. Throwaway: since I tell this story IRL *, there was an urban legend at my high school that one of the janitors quit because he saw a set of bloody footprints down the hallway. My bad, that was me. One day, I was staying late to complete a class project and dropped a heavy glass pane on my toe. It left a huge gash that I couldn't get to stop bleeding. Now, my school was the kind of place where having a shoe full of blood would get you a week's detention instead of a hospital visit, so I make sure to check around before I limped on home to bandage myself up. Our high school was a rectangle with a sunken library in the middle, so we had hallways that framed it. I was at one corner and at the other end was the janitor finishing up mopping the hallway. As soon as he turned the corner, I took off my shoes and socks since they were so full of blood I couldn't properly walk, and walked down the hallway and out the door. This left a perfect trail of bloody footprints all the way until the hallway dried out, which happened to be exactly where the exit door was. As the rest of the story goes, he turned around when he heard the door close and found a trail of bloody footprints down the hallway with no one there to take responsibility. Dude quit on the spot. Sorry to freak you out, janitor. Ghosts aren't real, or at least don't do that. The North Pond Hermit in Maine. Incredible story. A man lived completely alone in the woods of Maine for 27 years. There were urban legends of him because people in surrounding cabins, camps had random small stuff go missing all the time. Batteries, packages of food, flashlights, etc. He eventually got caught stealing said items when people became determined to figure it out. There is a book about him, called The Stranger in the Woods. His name is Christopher Knight. Look it up, it's really interesting. There's this road called Whippoorwill. Apparently it's either haunted or is a nesting ground for KKK, other creepy local cults. There are several articles about it on the internets. Anyway, myself and 2 friends drove there in night, and a big white Bronco came out of nowhere behind us with huge LED lights and tried to drive us off the road. A very narrow dirt road surrounded by dense trees. They were on our ass like making a speed. A big hill came in the road, it's about a mile long and you should be going slow. When we went over the top, the Bronco stayed behind and disappeared. It was intense. I figure they were patrolling for a cult clan meeting. But there is some truth to that urban legend, that's a fact. So I live in a small town in central Sweden, and I used to know this old guy that dated a younger woman from Thailand. Tragic thing is, their house burned down, killing the man. Now his son, Miss Thai was not the mother, told us about the remains the cops had found, only one thing, his heart. No bones, or anything else. So the son did some research on gods in Thailand and apparently there is a demon that leaves only the heart behind. The woman inherited all of his money, his car and RV, and rebuilt a new house where the old one stood. Also, yay, she still lives there. We had an old guy in our town who would park his white minivan, open up the back and play the spoons. He was really good at it and would play the spoons to whatever song was on the radio. Being in middle school, we all thought it was funny to joke that he was a pedophile. The pedophile jokes died shortly after, and a year after I graduated high school, Spoonman was still playing spoons, but last year he confessed to inappropriately touching a minor and was put in jail. Hella freaky because I talked to him once when I was 14 and he seemed nice enough. My girlfriend grew up in a village in Italy. And she remembered her dad telling her scary stories about spies who infiltrated the village during WW2 and kidnapped naughty girls who didn't go to sleep. She thought it was just a scary story he told her. But she actually found out that during WW2 there was actually people who snuck into the village, kidnapped a girl and executed her near the river. She was, apparently, the daughter of a politician who was staying in the village for safety with her grandmother and mother. The people, or spies, who came to kidnap her disappeared with nobody actually knowing who or why they killed a little girl. The Wyckoff Wanderer, Wyckoff, NJ. The myth was that an old man would wander the streets at night looking for his daughter who got hit by a fire truck or ambulance, can't remember. Anyway, me and my friends were in high school driving home and we fucking see him. We pull over and start a conversation with him. I don't remember if we asked about his daughter or whatever, but turns out he had a light sensitivity so he only walks at night. He offered me a cigarette, a rollie, which I took but I don't smoke. Really nice guy, just lonely. The Asylum Lake tunnels in Kalamazoo are real. There is a small lake and wildlife area just off of WMU's campus, and for a long time there were rumors going around that they were still there and accessible. Well, turns out that was true, and there was an old set of stairs that was partially buried that lead to a walled-up tunnel entrance. A few people used hand tools and ended up breaking part of the wall down and got inside only to find the tunnels fully intact, albeit a bit damp and murky. Somehow the authorities got wind and went and sealed the entrance again, but it's still very obvious where that was if you are really looking for them. That there's something making people disappear in our area in Nevada. As a kid it was more so they were hinting at aliens. Then as we grew up the disappearances have been a little too eerie, and it's been suspected that there's investigations that have been going on as to whether or not there's a serial killer in our area. Here's an article on it. I carry a firearm when traveling through and don't stop until I get to the cities. If you guys are ever coming through, just don't stop for anyone, especially after the darkness sets in. Not creepy, but a fun little anecdote. I lived in Madagascar for a while to do mission work and kinda get to know the culture of the local residents. I was asking people through a translator about their local myths and legends, and I was told about the Vazimba, a powerful sorcerer creature that can bless or curse people. He's much smaller than a normal man, but very agile, and he's invisible to everyone except the Malagasy people. Essentially a leprechaun. I asked around, and all the other Americans confirmed that it was a popular myth. I kept asking around about the Vazimba because I found it interesting, and even talked to some people who said they had actually seen and talked to him. Then one guy told us he lived under the train station in the town. Then one day we saw him, it was a little person, and he actually lived in a hollowed-out den under the train station. The Malagasy were amazed that I could actually see him. He was very elusive, and I only caught a glimpse of him once, but it was cool to see the truth behind the legend. Where I lived there was a legend about a child and pet-eating monster on the east side of town. We called it the Beast from the East. One child was reported missing, multiple pets as well. There was even a mangled-up deer found just out on the train tracks in that area. And the trains no longer use that track, it was blocked off so a train couldn't have ran over the deer. There were coyotes out in the woods around town, some, lynx, and maybe even wolverines, so most people assumed those animals were coming into town to follow the deer that would herd there every fall, spring, and just pick off pets because they were easy prey if not fenced in properly. Well, A few years ago, a trapper set up their traps to possibly catch some of these animals for fur and help reduce the amount of missing pets. He ended up snaring a mountain lion. Mountain lions should not exist this far east in Canada, as they are considered extinct on the eastern side of Canada, and we are only a few hundred, maybe 200 to 300 miles from Manitoba. Most lions stick close to the Alberta side if they are anywhere in Saskatchewan. So the beast from the east was real, although it was just an elusive big cat. We knew there was an actual monster living near town, even though law enforcement, the forest rangers, kept saying otherwise. Freddy Krueger is based on a real story. Hear me out. There's a small ethnic group local to Southeast Asia, the Hmong people. They've been oppressed for years by various countries, so they fought with the US during the Vietnam Civil War. As you know, we lost, and the North Vietnamese were gearing up to kill the Hmong people who had fought for the Southern Vietnamese. So the US airlifted a bunch of Hmong families to the US, primarily in California and Minnesota. One of the recent immigrants was a young man. He was perfectly healthy but suddenly died in his sleep. No one knew how he died. It's guessed it was a heart attack, but an autopsy wasn't done. This sent a panic throughout the community. There is a Hmong legend of a spirit that enters your dreams and kills you. Hmong people were terrified. They were also in a new community without access to some old traditions to protect them. Young men started staying awake, trying to avoid the monster. They downed caffeine. They were actually scared enough that it caused stress to their hearts and they died. Eventually, 117 men died from Hmong sleeping sickness. The article is here. Cropsey. Sort of like the boogeyman of Staten Island. During the 70s and 80s, kids on the island would go missing and the urban legend would attribute it to Cropsey. As it turned out, there really was a crazy kidnapper and serial killer who was responsible. He was caught and convicted. There is a great documentary about it. Used to be on Netflix, not sure if it still is, called Cropsey. Check it out if you get a chance. Not creepy, but asterisk. In my small rural hometown, there was a rumor that a bunch of city officials, cops, teachers, business owners, etc., basically anyone a kid would see as an authority figure, had massive orgies. Obviously, as you grew up, you came to your senses. Until one year when a teacher's husband stomped the absolute shit out of a local business owner in broad daylight. Turns out the legend wasn't just a legend. His wife was apparently a member of what was called the Hot Tub Club, and he wasn't invited. A good chunk of local leaders got outed as hosting orgies somewhat regularly. I'm more surprised it was kept secret as long as it was. Black Volga. In the 60s and 70s, there existed an urban legend in Poland that vampires in black limousines were kidnapping people, preferably little children. It was a tale parents told their kids who would then tell their friends, etc. Turns out it was a rumor that was spread by the Polish secret police, who actually used black cars to kidnap people. The aim was that no one would believe someone who would report they had witnessed a kidnapping. In the small town I'm from, there was one homeless guy. He technically lived with his mother but wasn't there much. His nickname was Sweet Pea. He was a big dude and of course developmentally disabled. He used to wander the town at night. Totally harmless, but there's always that, better watch it or Sweet Pea will get you. Well, while he was wandering, he used to go around to all the gas stations and collect the last little bit of oil left in all the oil cans in the trash. Everyone joked that he was actually rich from selling that oil. Well, when his mom died, the went to go clean her house out. And he had 10 55-gallon drums of oil in his garage. He was selling it, and that's how they survived financially. There's an urban legend in my town about a guy who hacked up his wife and kids to keep them from leaving him, then went to her closest friends and started picking them off one by one. It's one of those stories that gets told by the campfire to creep people out, because this guy hid in the woods from police for about a month before he was caught. Thing is, it's not a legend. My family doesn't talk about it much, but we were on his list. His wife had knitted my baby blanket. We had to go into protective custody while he was on the loose. When I was about 12 years old, a friend and I were playing in the woods that were known for being creepy. While building a fort, a strange man snuck up behind us and yelled at us to get off his land and never come back, yada yada. It really startled us, as we knew the land was a public area and had never been threatened by an adult before. Several years later, we found out he was an actual bank robber, wanted by the FBI for years. We were building our fort a few feet from his stash. Here's the news article about it. Wiki page Carl Gugasian. I live near a lake and there was an urban legend that there were huge lake monsters near the hydroelectric dam. Most people thought it was just some fishermen's tall tales. We all guessed it was just a twist on the classic, the one that got away. Turns out divers went into the water behind the dam for a routine inspection to see if there was any damage after months of heavy flooding in the area. Apparently one of the divers got too close to what he originally thought was a large moss-covered rock boulder until it moved and tried to latch on to the diver's arm. Apparently there are plus-minus 200 pounds catfish behind the dam which thrive on the dead fish that go through the hydroelectric portion of the dam. The agitated water makes it easier for the large catfish to breathe and grow past what is commonly found in the area, and the lack of fishers as all commercial fishing is banned for at least 1,000 meters means these fish are truly free to grow to truly enormous sizes. There's an urban legend about a thief stealing a suitcase containing a dead dog. In the 70s, my crazy artist aunt and uncle lived in Manhattan and their German Shepherd died. Having the city come dispose of the dog was expensive. Lugging it up to the animal control office in the Bronx was cheaper. So they folded up the 50+ lb dog into a suitcase and headed for the subway. Except my uncle set down the heavy suitcase at a crosswalk while they waited for the light and a couple of kids ran by and snatched it. My uncle gave chase, but obese alcoholics don't get far in New York in the summer. For years they laughed, speculating what those kids said when they opened the luggage. And I wonder again and again, were they the source of that tale? Oh man, I have one. When I was teen there were rumors of Snowsuit Man, a dude that used to wander the big park in my city at night, in the summer, in a snowsuit all done up from head to toe, hood and everything. It was rumored he used to ask people walking through the park to beat him up. I know, pretty outrageous, right? One night a bunch of us were chilling in said park being teens, smoking weed and goofing around. All of a sudden in the distance we see a person. It wasn't unusual to see other people in the park, even in the middle of the night like this. What is unusual is that you could see the person was dressed in white from head to toe. As he got closer a silence fell over all of us as we realized, holy fucking shit, that is a person. In a goddamn snowsuit. We were terrified and amazed all at once. He sat on a bench a little down the path from us. Just sitting there. One of my more adventurous, or stupid maybe, friends went over. Sat on the bench a bit then came back over. Snowsuit Man didn't ask to get his ass kicked like we heard. In fact, he didn't respond or even acknowledge my friend's presence. He did apparently smell absolutely awful. It was obvious, my friend said, that he didn't take that thing off. And shit and piss in there, as evidenced by the massive stains he saw when he got closer. So there you go. While not exactly like we heard, unless it wasn't a night he felt like getting beat up, the fucking Snowsuit Man exists. This is a very recent and local story as it happened at a middle school that I used to attend. There was this janitor, though he actually left when I was still at the school, and substitute bus driver at our school that everyone loved. He would give all of the kids candy and show them around the areas of the school that kids weren't supposed to go, like the boiler room. I even heard that he ate dinner at a kid's house once. Even after he left the school he would still visit, sometimes just say hi to the kids. There were always some jokes that he was a pedophile, but everyone at the school loved him and thought that he was a great guy. Recently he was arrested for having thousands of pictures and videos of child porn. Makes things pretty weird in hindsight. Welcome to the World of AIDS is an urban legend about a man meeting a woman at a bar, going back to his place to sleep together, only to have him wake up to her being gone and the famous slogan, "Welcome to the World of AIDS," written on his bathroom mirror. The urban legend has many different variations. It was just a parable about casual sex and risk. This was largely considered an urban legend. That is, until stealth pausing actually turned out to be a very real thing. Modern actual cases involve a British man named Daryl Rowe, who, already knowing he had HIV, would send a text after sex to his many victims saying things like, "I have HIV lol. Oops," and, "I'm riddled." Others have also been convicted for knowingly doing this on Craigslist. In my hometown there was a local legend about a man who would sometimes be seen having sex with trees. Some called him Mr. Woodcock, but he was more commonly known as the tree shagger. Though it must be nonsense, but one night a friend and I were out walking his dog along a narrow, tree-lined lane. We heard a grunting sound from the undergrowth, and there he was. He was wearing a long overcoat which had wrapped around a poor innocent tree, and he had his trousers around his ankles as he defiled the shrubbery with a flagrant disregard for splinters. We had an older couple that would come into the store I worked at when I was 15. They clearly had mental development, mental health problems, and the rumor was they were siblings and the 2 teenage girls with them were their children. About 5 years later I'd find out someone had called the state about them, and turns out, from what I remember, to be mostly true. The parents were apparently the result of incest, and they carried on the family tradition, as it were. I think the state removed their daughters and put them in state custody since they weren't able to take care of themselves, and I don't remember what happened to the parents. There were abandoned tunnels below my town, a large part used to be a self-sustaining mental institution covering several square miles. Everyone talked about them, but no one ever talked about actually being in them. Went spelunking in the woods and found an old maintenance shack. There was a basement that was flooded. Went back a couple years later when there was bad drought. Basement has a rusted door leading into said tunnels. Nothing special, and no escaped crazy people.